There is a tomato plant in front of me right now that looks like a small jungle. It has leaves the size of dinner plates. It is almost as tall as I am, and it has maybe 4 tomatoes on it. 4. Right next to it, there is another plant. Same variety, same soil, same sun, same water. And that plant is carrying so much fruit that the branches are tied up just to keep them from snapping under the weight. The difference between these two plants is about 90 seconds of work a week. That is it. One of them gets pruned, and one of them does not. And if you have ever wondered why your tomato plants grow into massive green monsters that produce almost nothing, I am going to show you exactly what is happening and exactly where to cut. The reason most home gardeners never learn this properly is honestly kind of annoying. It is not because the information is complicated. It is because the advice you get is either too vague to be useful, or it is designed to sell you something. You get told to pinch out the suckers, but nobody shows you what a sucker actually looks like at every stage. You get sold special pruning shears, special ties, special clips, special fertilizers to fix the mess that bad pruning created. The old gardeners knew exactly what to do, and they did it with their fingernails. That is the whole idea. You do not need a tool. You do not need a product. You need to understand one simple principle about how a tomato plant thinks, because the plant is not trying to give you tomatoes. The plant is trying to survive and spread. Your job is to convince it, gently and repeatedly, that producing fruit is the best way to do that. I know exactly what you might be thinking right now. Probably something like, my tomatoes grow fine without all that fuss. Or maybe I tried pruning once and the plant looked naked and sad, and then I got sunscalded and gave up. I completely understand. I thought the same thing for years. My first garden was a disaster of good intentions. I planted tomatoes too close together. I let every branch grow. I watered them every single day because I thought I was being kind. And by August I had a wall of green so thick I could not even find the tomatoes until they were overripe and split. I spent an entire summer fighting blight and picking mushy fruit out of a tangle of leaves. Do you know that feeling? Hand on heart, how many of you have a garden that looks exactly like this right now, lush and green and full of promise, and then you lift a leaf and find nothing but disappointment? I know it all too well. So let us talk about the usual fixes, because I have tried all of them, and I want to save you the trouble. First, there is the do-nothing approach. Just let the plant do what it wants. It is natural, right? Well, a tomato plant left to itself will put about 70% of its energy into growing leaves and stems, and only about 30% into fruit. Worse than that, all that dense growth blocks airflow. And blocked airflow means humidity, and humidity means fungus. I have watched entire beds of tomatoes collapse into a brown, spotted mess by late summer, because the leaves were so thick they never dried out after rain. It is like trying to dry laundry in a closed bathroom. It just never happens. Then there is the opposite approach. The scorched earth pruner. The person who reads one article about airflow and then hacks the plant back to a bare stalk, stripping off every leaf below the top fruit cluster and half the leaves above it. I have done this. I was that person. I thought I was helping. What I actually did was expose every tomato to direct, brutal afternoon sun. The fruit got sunscalded, those pale, leathery patches that make the tomato inedible. And the plant went into shock. It stopped growing for 2 weeks. Pruning too hard is like curing a headache by cutting off your head. Technically, the headache is gone, but you have created a much bigger problem. And then there is the expensive fix. The special tomato fertilizers, the bloom boosters, the magic sprays that promise to turn that jungle into a fruit factory. I have bought them. I have poured them. And you know what happens. You get more leaves. Bigger leaves. Darker green leaves. Because nitrogen makes leaves, and most of those products are mostly nitrogen with a fancy label. You are feeding the problem, not fixing it. The plant is already doing exactly what it wants to do, which is grow foliage. You are just paying to help it do that faster. So where did I finally learn the right way? From a woman named Mrs. Kowalska, who lived 2 doors down from me and grew tomatoes that were the envy of the entire neighborhood. She was in her 70s. She had been gardening on that same plot for over 40 years, and she never bought a single product from a garden center. Not once. She saved her seeds in paper envelopes. She made her own compost. And every summer her tomato plants looked more like small trees, clean and open, and absolutely loaded with fruit. I asked her one day what her secret was. She looked at me, wiped her hands on her apron, and said in her accent, "The plant wants to be a bush. You must teach it to be a tree." And then she showed me with her bare hands exactly where to pinch. That one conversation changed my entire approach to growing tomatoes. I am going to teach you what she taught me. The secret is not a product. It is not a special technique that requires training. It is something you already have. It is your thumb and your index finger. That is the whole toolkit. And the thing you are looking for is called a sucker. A sucker is a new growth point that appears in the crotch, the armpit, the V shape between the main stem and a leaf branch. If you let it grow, it becomes a whole new stem, with its own leaves, its own flowers, its own suckers. It becomes a competing plant, basically, attached to the same root system. And that is the problem. The plant cannot tell the difference between the main stem and the sucker. It treats them all equally. It sends water and nutrients to all of them. And suddenly you have a bush with 5 main stems instead of 1, and every single one of them is trying to be the boss. So here is what you do. And I want you to do this with me, right now, if you have a tomato plant anywhere nearby. Go look at it, find the main stem, the thick one that comes out of the ground. Now look at where a leaf branch attaches to that main stem. Right in that V, there is probably a small new shoot growing. It might be tiny, just a little nub. It might be 6 inches long with its own leaves and even flower buds. That is the sucker. You are going to remove it. If it is small, less than 2 inches, you just pinch it between your thumb and forefinger and snap it off. Clean. Done. If it is bigger, woody, hard to snap, you can use a clean pair of scissors or pruners, but honestly, your fingers work for 90% of them. The important thing is to do this early and often. Not once a season. Not when you remember. Every few days during the peak growing season. Mrs. Kowalska called it visiting the plants. She would walk through her garden every morning with her coffee, and she would just look and pinch and move on. 10 minutes a day. That is it. Now I know what you are thinking. Do not do anything else yet. Let me give you the full picture, because there is a right way and a wrong way to do this, and the wrong way is only slightly better than doing nothing. First, the type of tomato matters. If you are growing determinate tomatoes, the bush types that grow to a fixed size and set all their fruit at once, you should prune very lightly or not at all. Those plants are genetically programmed to stop growing, so every sucker you remove is potential fruit you are throwing away. But if you are growing indeterminate tomatoes, the tall vining types that keep growing and producing until frost, those are the ones you prune hard. Those are the ones this whole method is for. Most heirloom varieties, most cherry tomatoes, big boy, beefsteak, San Marzano, these are all indeterminate. Check your seed packet or your plant tag. If it says indeterminate, keep reading. If it says determinate, you can relax. Second, do not remove the suckers below the first flower cluster right away. Those lower suckers can be left until they are a few inches long, and then you can either pinch them or, if you want to be clever, you can let 1 or 2 of the lowest ones grow and then bury them under soil. They will root, but that is a different topic. For now, focus on the main stem and the suckers above the first flower cluster. Third, and this is the one that trips people up, do not remove all the leaves. The leaves are the solar panels. They are what make the sugar that makes the fruit sweet. You need leaves. You just do not need infinite leaves. Once your plant is established and fruiting, you can remove the lower leaves, the ones below the first fruit cluster, because those are the oldest, they are closest to the soil, and they are the first to catch fungal spores splashing up from the ground. Removing them improves airflow and reduces disease. But leave the upper leaves alone. The plant needs them to feed the fruit and to shade the fruit from the worst of the sun. It is a balancing act. You want an open, airy plant, not a naked one. So let me give you the exact weekly routine. This is what I do, and it takes me about 10 minutes per plant over the course of a season. Week 1 to 3 after planting, do almost nothing. Let the plant settle in, let the roots get established. You can remove any leaves that are touching the ground, because those are just asking for disease. Week 4 to 6, the plant is growing fast now. This is when the suckers start appearing. Start pinching them when they are small. At the same time, make sure your plant is tied to a stake or a cage or a string. A pruned tomato plant is much easier to support because you are training it to 1 or 2 main stems instead of a sprawling bush. Week 7 to the end of the season, this is the maintenance phase. Visit the plant every few days. Pinch the new suckers. Remove any yellowing or diseased leaves. Remove the lower leaves below the first fruit cluster. And about a month before your first expected frost, you can do something called topping. Pinch off the growing tip of the main stem. This stops the plant from making new flowers that will never have time to ripen, and it directs all the energy into ripening the fruit that is already there. That is the whole system. It is not complicated. It is just consistent. Now let me explain the science, because once you understand why this works, you will never skip it again. A tomato plant has a finite amount of energy. It gets that energy from the sun, through its leaves, and it uses that energy to do 3 things. Grow more leaves and stems, produce flowers and fruit, and defend itself from pests and disease. When you let the plant grow unlimited suckers, it spends most of its energy on the first thing, growth. More stems, more leaves, more of everything, because the plant is in a race to cover as much ground as possible. That is its survival strategy. In the wild, a tomato plant is a sprawling vine that crawls along the ground, roots wherever it touches soil, and produces a few small fruits to spread its seeds. It is not trying to give you a harvest. It is trying to survive. When you prune the suckers, you are telling the plant in the only language it understands that the race is over. You are not allowed to sprawl. You are going to grow up on this stake, and you are going to put your energy into fruit. And the plant responds. It has to, because the energy has to go somewhere. If it cannot make new stems, it makes more flowers. If it cannot make more leaves, it makes bigger, sweeter fruit. That is the whole idea. There is also the airflow thing. Tomato plants are susceptible to a whole host of fungal diseases, early blight, late blight, septoria leaf spot, and they all love the same conditions. Warm, wet, still air. A dense, unpruned tomato plant creates its own microclimate, a little pocket of humidity where fungal spores can germinate and spread. When you prune, you open up the plant. The breeze can move through it. The leaves dry faster after rain. The soil dries faster too. It is the difference between living in a stuffy room with the windows closed and living in a house with a cross breeze. Same temperature, completely different environment. And there is one more thing, and this is the thing that gets me every time. When you prune a tomato plant properly, you can see the fruit. You can see it forming. You can see it ripening. You can see when something is wrong. In a dense, unpruned jungle, the tomatoes are hidden. They rot before you find them. They get eaten by slugs before you notice. They split because you did not see they were ready. A pruned plant is an honest plant. It shows you what it is doing. It trusts you to look after it. And you become a better gardener, not because you learned a trick, but because you started paying attention. Let me give you my honest results, because I want you to know what to expect. The first year I pruned properly, I had 12 indeterminate tomato plants. Before pruning, my average per plant was maybe 10 to 15 pounds, and half of those were small or cracked or damaged. The year I started pruning, I averaged over 25 pounds per plant. Some of the cherry varieties gave me more than 40. And the fruit was bigger, more even, fewer cracks, less disease. I had plants that were still producing in October, because they were healthy, because the airflow was good, because I had been pinching suckers all summer. And the work total across the whole season was maybe 5 hours. For 12 plants, that is less time than most people spend watching television in a single evening. The return on that time is enormous. Now, if you want to scale this up, if you have a big garden or you are growing for market, the same principles apply. You just need to be more systematic. Some commercial growers prune to a single stem and run the plants up strings, removing every sucker and every leaf below the current fruit cluster. That is the extreme version, and it works, but it is labor-intensive. For the home gardener, 2 stems is a good compromise. Let one sucker, just one, grow from below the first flower cluster, and train it up a second string or stake. Now you have two main stems, each producing fruit but still open and manageable. That is what I do now. 2 stems per plant, a stake for each, and a weekly visit with my coffee. That is the whole system. And here is the thing I keep coming back to. This knowledge is not new. It is not a hack. It is not a secret that was hidden by the fertilizer companies, exactly. It is more that it was forgotten because it is too simple to sell. You cannot package a pinch. You cannot put a price tag on walking through your garden every morning and looking at your plants. Mrs. Kowalska knew that. The old Italian gardeners who grew tomatoes on their balconies in Brooklyn knew that. The market gardeners 100 years ago knew that. And somewhere along the way, we stopped learning from them, and we started buying products instead. We bought the cages and the fertilizers and the sprays, and we forgot that the most powerful tool in the garden is attention. That is what pruning really is. It is attention, applied consistently with your own 2 hands. So here is what I want you to do. Go out to your garden today. Find your tomato plants. Look at them. Really look at them. Find the suckers in the V between the stem and the leaves. Pinch one off. Feel it snap. That little green nub in your fingers is the difference between a jungle and a harvest. And then go back tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. Make it a habit. Make it your coffee walk. And when August comes, and your neighbors are complaining about their green monsters with no fruit, you will be picking tomatoes by the bowlful. And you will know something they do not. You will know that the plant wanted to be a bush, and you taught it to be a tree. If this made sense to you, if it saved you from another summer of disappointment, then pass it on. Share it with someone who is staring at a jungle right now. And if you want more of this kind of practical, old-school gardening wisdom, the kind that does not cost a thing, subscribe to the channel. I will keep sharing what I have learned the hard way so you do not have to. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the garden.